What's up? How's it going? Shout out to everybody who's tuned in already. I don't normally go live 2 days in a row. I don't normally go live at like five something, but I'm here and some of y'all are here too, and that means the world to me. So, welcome to another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet. Today is going to be another quick episode, and it's going to actually kind of be a continuation of some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday. So yeah, you can almost consider this like a sequel or a part two or a part B. Yesterday we talked about the Jimmy Johnson advisory board thing, which I think everybody is on the same page now, but I'm going to play some audio from that. Um, and we also talked a little bit about some of the stuff that Micah Parsons has been saying lately. And I said that I wanted to go back and watch the full thing again because I was hearing a lot of takes that didn't necessarily align with what I got from it the first time I watched it. And I'm gonna be honest, it took a lot for me to really narrow down the clips that I wanted to stick to, but I narrowed it down to a few minutes. So we'll do a watch along with that and talk about what he is really saying. And I do want to get y'all's opinions. So, if you're in the chat, like feel free to chime in, feel free to ask questions. Even if there's a part of the video that I cut out and you want to talk about it, feel free to bring it up. And if you're over on Twitter and you want to make absolutely sure that I see your comments, come over and join us on YouTube. Just search for the Bitches Love Sports podcast. And that way we can be absolutely sure that I don't miss your comments. But as usual, we are going to start off with shout outs and call outs. Like I said, super quick episode, so it'll be super quick shout outs and call outs. So the first shout out goes to the College Football Playoff Committee because they have unanimously adopted a 12-team playoff model. Go them. So basically what we're dealing with here, and I'm gonna pull up some notes so I make sure I don't miss anything. They've got a lot of information on the NCAA website. But basically what we're dealing with here is a 12-team playoff model that they're referring to it as the 5-7 model. And that is because, and this part is like right off of the NCAA website, it says the new 12-team college football playoff field will include the 5 highest ranked conference champions, which will receive automatic bids. The 7 highest ranked teams remaining will round out the 12-team format, and the top 4 teams will receive a first round bye to the quarterfinals. And they have a little example here based on where everybody was ranked on Selection Sunday this past year. So based on how that's set up, and let me see if I can actually just share this with you. Yeah, we're going to go through it real quick. No big deal. So based on how that's set up, the 4 teams that would have received a bye would have been... I'm looking for it. I wrote it down. The 4 teams that would have received a bye would have been this past year, Michigan, Alabama, Texas, and Washington, right? And then you would have had 8 more teams. So those 4 teams would have received a bye, and then the other 8 teams would have had to compete in the first round. So what that means, if you're not one of those first 4 teams, now instead of the way the college football players have happened in the past, now you're going to have to win 4 games in a row in order to win the national title. So the first 4 rounds would have been number 12, Liberty at number 5, Florida, number 11, Ole Miss at number 6, Georgia, number 10, Penn State at number 7, Ohio State, and number 9, Missouri at number 8, Oregon. Now, if you're listening to those school names, you might have noticed that Oklahoma, for example, is one of the teams that's been brought up a lot because based on this model, this past year, they would not have been included in the college football playoff. They wouldn't have been one of the 12 teams included. And so one of the notes the NCAA put here is that they said, keep in mind that the number 12 seed will go to Liberty as the Flames are the 6th highest ranked conference champion in the CFP rankings, replacing Oklahoma, a team that finished 3rd in the Big 12 as a number 12 team. So I think they're going to have to work out some things as far as verbiage just to make sure people understand exactly what's happening. But yeah, it should be interesting. It looks like the quarterfinals are going to be the Fiesta Bowl on December 31st, and then on January 1st, you're going to have the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl for the quarterfinals. And then the Orange Bowl will be one of the semifinals. The Cotton Bowl will be another semifinals. And then you'll have a standalone national championship, which this coming year is going to be in Atlanta. Now, for me personally, I'm excited about this because of how this is going to work for college football. But I do think there are some implications that it's going to have for college athletics as a whole that we have yet to see how it plays out. And what I mean by that is This past year and in years past, we've seen players opt out of bowl games and opt out of their college's postseason because they want to get ready for the draft, they want to get ready for the combine, they don't want to get hurt, so on and so forth. And a lot of people thought that NIL would negate that. Not necessarily, right? We still saw people opting out. But here's the thing that's going to eventually happen with NIL. NIL is not the same as revenue sharing. That money is coming from somewhere else. And so for the schools like USC, for example, where that's coming from other businesses like Beats by Dre and shoe companies and all that, they're less likely to quote unquote run out of that money. But for the schools that are getting their NIL money from boosters, eventually that money is going to run out because the player that you, let's call it what it is, essentially paid to stay at your school this past year, they might hit the portal if they think they can get more from somewhere else. And if you go to that booster and be like, hey, can I get another 10,000, 100,000 or whatever, like where's that money coming from, right? So with the revenue sharing model, you ensure that the money that athletes are getting is coming from a budget. It doesn't really run out because it's accounted for, right? But with NIL, you always run the risk that a booster could just up and pull out. A sponsor could just up and pull out. And then what does that do to your program, you know? So it could cause problems down the road. And then what you're dealing with is like where colleges will have to choose between their current model or revenue sharing. And a lot of people might say, okay, we'll just adopt a revenue sharing model. That could work for bigger sports like football and basketball. But when you look at the complete athletics landscape at a lot of these universities, there are sports programs that don't necessarily bring in that kind of money. There are some sports programs that actually cost the school money, but because it's all nonprofit, supported by federal programs, so on and so forth, that has not been an issue. But if you switch to a revenue sharing model, then you're either going to have some sports that are based on that model and other sports that aren't, or you're going to have all of your athletics programs on a revenue sharing model. And that could completely eliminate a lot of women's sports and some of the more minor sports like your golf teams, your bowling teams, your curling teams, so on and so forth. So while adopting this 12-team playoff model is a good step in the right direction for college football, especially because it gives an option for some of the schools that aren't part of legitimate conferences right now, like Notre Dame is not part of a conference. And then you have the Pac-12, which is historically a conference, but now it's down to, I think, like Washington State and Oregon State. Those are the only two schools. So they're not a legitimate conference, but those schools still have ways into the playoff, right? So it's good for them. However, whenever we look at the way NIL actually works and where the revenue comes from in college sports, and the fact that college athletics includes a lot more sports than football and basketball, there's a lot of other shoes left to drop in college athletics before they really get it right and get to a sustainably stable point. So progress, but yeah, there's some other stuff that's going to come down the pipeline that'll be interesting. I want to see some of y'all's comments about this. Derek says he could watch and listen to me all day. Thanks. I have a lot of content. Feel free to go back in the archives. Appreciate you. And Dom says, oh snap, they adapted the 12-team playoff. Yes. If you go to the NCAA website or just Google it, a few people have talked about it. I think they talked about it on SportsCenter earlier. So, yeah. And if you need me to go back, there's not a lot of people in chat today. If you need me to go back and explain it, let me know and I'll be happy to go back and do that for you. But otherwise, I'll probably tweet a link out about it later. But yeah, it should be interesting. Good for football, but I just think the whole college athletics landscape is going to get like really complicated. All right, so that's the first shout out. Shout out to them for figuring that out. Next shout out goes to, I didn't really put a next shout out. Like I said, it's going to be a quick show. So the next shout out, I'm going to just call it a shout out to Jimmy Johnson. It's not really a shout out, but it's a continuation of the conversation that we had yesterday. So yesterday we talked about that whole advisory board quote, and I said that I was going to follow up on that conversation once I got the audio. Now, I was thinking, because several websites released that headline yesterday, that it must have been from a recent episode. It was actually from an older episode of the Joe Rose Show that came out last week. Now, because I like to educate y'all, fun fact when it comes to things like that happen, when you see multiple places come out with like similar headlines or the same exact story, a lot of times that's, somebody has gone through and found something that they think is like clickbait worthy, basically. And it's either the same writer working for multiple platforms, or it's like this one program that has sent out the same idea to multiple platforms. So it could be a press release that came from someone, or it could be that they're getting like a newsletter from somewhere and the newsletter mentioned it. And so all these people happened to mention it. But I don't think it's a coincidence that multiple news sources posted the same thing at the same time about something that was like actually several days old. This time of year, especially whenever it comes to football, people are looking for something to keep getting clicks because a lot of these online news sources, that's how they get their money. It's like there's ads on the page, so people have to go to the page so that they can get ad revenue. And they're like, how can we get more people on this page? Will mislead people into thinking that Jimmy Johnson has been hired in some sort of advisory role by the Cowboys, which is basically what those headlines did. So I pulled up the audio. It was a 30-something minute conversation that he had, but the audio itself is about a minute long. So I'm just going to play the minute of audio so that way y'all don't have to just take it from me that this was really not a hired position. You can kind of hear it for yourself. And I want you to listen to how he says what he says, and you can kind of hear that he's joking. The phrase advisory board was definitely not meant to be taken seriously or meant to be taken as some sort of official role. So let me share my screen. Let me go back to the beginning.
So I got to ask, I haven't talked to you since the whole thing in the Ring of Honor and Jerry Jones and that relationship, which has kind of been back and forth. It was good to see. And Jimmy, I think it's probably the first time I can ever remember a guy going in the Hall of Fame way before going to the Ring of Honor. But that's okay. But I thought you were a real pro with the whole thing, Jimmy.
Well, since the Ring of Honor, Jerry and I, man, I'm on his advisory board now. We're talking on the phone. I talked to him about an hour after his Green Bay loss, and he's talking about what all he needed to do because he's had big decisions on Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn and Dak Prescott. But everything's hunky dory now. So I'm back in the fold with the Cowboys.
Well, I thought it was great. I mean, that was pretty cool to see your guys, and I know a lot of your guys been pushing for it openly for a long time, and whatever it is, it just feels right in Dallas. It really does. It was great to see. So, Jimmy, I got to ask you.
So that was essentially the clip. So, like I said, when you hear him use the phrase advisory board, he almost kind of laughs when he says it. And he's referring to the fact that apparently he and Jerry Jones were not on that great of terms for a while. Then the Ring of Honor ceremony happens, and then they're back in each other's good graces. And he's like, oh yeah, it's been a long time talking to him after the Green Bay loss. And so that's where the advisory board reference came from. He's just kind of making light of the fact that he was able to talk for a while with Jerry and give him some advice about some of the players who are currently on the roster. So Jimmy Johnson is not in any sort of official position with the Cowboys. Although, if there's a way that he can influence Jerry in the right direction, more power to him. I wish him all the luck in the world when it comes to that. But it sounds like Jerry's just talking to a lot of people because the same way that he had this conversation with Jimmy Johnson, according to Micah Parsons, if you listen to his full conversation with Stephen A. Smith, it sounds like he also had a really long conversation with Micah Parsons. So based on that logic, you could almost say that Micah is also on Jerry Jones's advisory board, But it really just sounds like Jerry is just reaching out to various people for advice. Speaking of which, I'll say the next shout out, getting into the main topic for today, does go to Micah Parsons. So like I said yesterday, I really like how he handled the conversation with Stephen A. Smith. I was kind of concerned when I heard that he was going to debate Stephen A. and have this conversation, largely centered around Dak Prescott and his value as a quarterback and as an athlete for the Dallas Cowboys. And so whenever I saw that the episode happened so soon after Stephen A. was on Micah's show, I was kind of like, oh no. But I watched it. He did well. But then I started seeing other people's reactions to the episode, and there were people who were like, okay, he's taking shots at D-Law, and he's taking shots at this person, he's taking shots at that person, and I did not hear that at all when I watched it. So I wanted to go ahead and do a quick watch along with you guys and go through some of those sections, and I definitely want to get y'all's take on various things, but I'm gonna just tell y'all what I got from it. And so, spoiler alert, no, I don't think he was taking shots at D-Law or anybody. Real quick before we get into that, I do want to, let's see what Ryder says. Do you go by Ryder or do you go by Albert, by the way? Like, is Ryder a title? I can never tell with some of these names. We'll call you Al for now. Al says, all that advisory board line means is that Jerry and Jimmy on speaking terms these days. It's pretty obvious. Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I'll say this, I didn't get to watch everybody's content on it, so it was hard to tell who was actually buying into the idea that Jimmy was like hired by the Cowboys versus who was what I consider to be correctly interpreting it. But yeah, that's pretty much all it is. But shout out to people being on good terms and burying the hatchet and not in each other's back. But let me pull up this video file real quick and we'll start going through. Oh no, where'd it go? Give me 1 second. This is an issue that I've been having lately where I'll save something and then I just can't find it. While I'm doing that, ask me some questions in the chat and then I'll answer them. Nam said, LMAO, you're catching me up on everything because I hadn't heard any of this. Are you talking about the idea that Micah was taking shots at D-Law? You hadn't heard that part? Or you hadn't heard about him being on the show with Stephen A. Smith at all? You also said they did Saban a solid changing it when he retired. By the time Saban retired, he was so sick of college football. Like, ever since they made the whole NIL payment thing legal, you could kind of tell that he was, I guess you could say, frustrated with how things were going. And I don't think I ever heard him say a single good thing about NIL, which I get it. It changed the way that he had to recruit. However, sorry, I'm searching and talking to y'all at the same time. So I might just have to resave this, you guys, and just hope that my computer doesn't crash in the process because it's not coming up. But yeah, I get it. I get that it changed the way that he had to recruit, but I feel like being so upset about it is just him ignoring how many advantages that he had for so long, because in a way, while NIL is not perfect, but in a way, it gave smaller schools an opportunity to compete, in my opinion. It gave smaller schools something that they could offer to, because there were some good athletes who, even if they knew that they wouldn't be starting, even if they knew they wouldn't be a star, they'd want to go to a school like Alabama, for example, just for the notoriety, just for the chance to experience, going to a bowl game, even if it meant that, they were going to be sitting on the bench or somebody's backup or whatever. And so NIL gave these athletes an opportunity to build their own brand, to get a little bit more notoriety, to get a little bit more attention, despite the fact that they weren't going to a historically high-performing school. And so that was the perspective from which I really appreciated it. Now, I will admit it wasn't always fair. And if you're not a fan of the whole pay to play thing, you might have a problem with it in that sense as well. And I do think that, they're going to need to work out those things really soon. But I do think so far, it's done more good than harm, in my opinion. All right, so we got that. We're going to export that here. I'm sorry, you guys, I tried. Okay, it actually says it's in this other folder, so give me 1 more second. I appreciate y'all so much for bearing with me. I'm trying to be more consistent, so going live every day it only serves to reason that eventually I'd run into a little bit of a snag. And let me just make sure this is the right video. I want to check the length. Okay, perfect.
Football, man. What happened? What happened to the Cowboys? I mean, what?
I mean, I know, but I'm asking you.
Listen, what happened against the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs, man? What happened to y'all?
I just think we hit. I think Green Bay just had a really good start, and all year we've been a front leading team. Right. We get to establish some things. We mix in the run, play action. Dak really gets going. But when you get down 21 so early, it's hard, bro. Like, cause it's almost pass every time. So they got to get into their blitzes, get into their scheme. Schematically, they was just clicking on all cylinders. And when you're clicking on all cylinders, it's hard to win.
So before we go on from there, I want y'all to pay attention to how the first question Stephen A. asked about this particular situation was asked. What's up, JV? How's it going? And Willie, I agree with you, and we're going to get into that. So yeah, I want y'all to pay attention to how the first question was asked. Stephen A. didn't come out and say like, hey, D-Law said this, do you agree? He said, hey, what happened with Green Bay? So Micah gives his perspective on what happened with Green Bay. Now, because he didn't say the exact same thing that D-Law said, when he follows up and asks about D-Law, he almost has to admit that he doesn't necessarily agree with D-Law. So it's not like he jumped out there like, yo, D-Law was wrong. Let me tell you why. Stephen A. Smith asked him for his perspective. He gave it. It didn't align with what he heard from another Cowboys player. And so then he was like, okay, so that's different than what I heard before. So tell me why.
Lawrence came on First Take Super Bowl week. They're show on ESPN every week. They won 10 and 12. And he comes on the show and he said, guys might have been a little tired. He said, because so much is expected of us. Every game is like somebody's Super Bowl. So we go through stuff that most teams don't go through. And I think that guys were a little bit fatigued. When you heard he said that, what were your thoughts?
Don't get me wrong. Yes, I agree that teams play us like the Super Bowl. We are the Dallas Cowboys. But in the end, that's not a good enough reason or excuse to say that publicly. If you say that to someone else, you know what I'm saying? Like one-on-one, you know what I'm saying? Cameras off, sure, be my guest. But when I feel like once that.
So we're going to keep going, but I just want to pause and say, I actually do appreciate that one of the first things that he says is he's trying to lend a little bit of legitimacy to part of what D-Law says. So he's like, yeah, D-Law had a point. However, I don't think that's the entire reason that we didn't perform. And it's not something that I would have said publicly when we have fans that are looking for answers. I personally, now feel free to disagree in the comments if you like, or feel free to agree in the comments. But I personally don't see anything wrong with him saying that. A lot of content creators, a lot of analysts, a lot of fans have actually said that, hey, teams show up different against the Cowboys. Like, we noticed this. And it's true. Like, this past season, we've literally seen teams show up and do things against the Cowboys that they don't do like the entire rest of the season, before or after they play the Cowboys. It's like something that they pull out of their hat just for the star, you know? So he's not wrong. But Mike is basically saying like, hey, that's the thing that happens. But as an athlete, as a competitor, I just need to be prepared for that. And if it impacts me, kind of like how they do with injuries, right? A lot of times they might be dealing with an injury or some sort of pain or discomfort that they will not go in a press conference and talk about. And it sounds like he's approaching this in a very similar way, where he's like, hey, you know, if it impacts me, if it impacts the game, that's something that I can talk about with people one-on-one. It's not something that I'm going to go out in public and say, okay, this is the reason that we lost, because it's something I've come to expect playing for this team.
Regular season end, and they get in a playoff, you're supposed to get rejuvenated. Like, this is a whole new me, whole new you. Like, we need to get ready. And that's part of that culture stuff where I was talking about, where I want to dive into the players that we got to change. Like, it should never, you should never go into a game like I'm tired, like I'm ready to go home. Because that's exactly what's going to happen, and it did happen. I'm coming to the game every week like, man, I got 4 more weeks left. I don't know what y'all got, but I got 4 more weeks left. Like, that's part of the culture and identity that I just feel like we're missing. Like that's just something like I don't agree with at all. Like regular season, all right, yeah, I'm tired, like I'm wore out. But as soon as playoffs,
Hold on, can y'all still hear me? My picture is gone. And I don't know why. Give me one second. Okay, can y'all hear me now? Okay, we're good. All right, let me finish up this.
knowing how limited and how hard it is to win in playoff game, I would never say I'm tired or I feel fatigued, because that's my job to not feel that way.
Let me ask you.
All right, so what I'm gonna ask y'all to do is just remove D-Law's comments from the equation, right? If we really just think about what Micah Parsons just said, what he said about how, hey, I feel like once we enter the playoffs, it's single elimination. I got 4 weeks left. Whatever I got in the tank, I need to pull it out for these 4 weeks. We have to get it done because the stakes are higher. There's so much on the line. So I'm not about to come to you and say I didn't get it done because I'm fatigued, or I didn't get it done because the other team played hard. Of course they played hard, right? So if we remove this idea that he's negating what D-Law was saying, I feel like Micah Parsons is saying exactly what we want to hear anybody on the team say. And so that's where I was with it before I started hearing other people say that he was taking shots at D-Law. I'm like, no, to me it sounds like he's taking accountability. To me it sounds like he's saying, hey, whether or not I'm tired, that doesn't matter. If I'm tired, I need to figure that shit out for the playoffs. This is a single elimination situation where everything that we've been working for this entire season, including the preseason, is on the line right now. I need to get it done. Fuck being tired. Fuck the other team playing hard. This is the time to just look at it as whatever I got to do for these next 4 weeks to get the job done, it needs to get done. And if I don't get it done, I need to take responsibility for that. And really, I don't understand what more a person could really ask for from an athlete. So I would challenge anybody who feels like he is taking shots at D-Law to look at it the same way, to just kind of remove D-Law's comments from the equation as something Stephen A. Smith asked about, and he was respectful enough to actually answer the question properly. But outside of that, it's not like he went out of his way to just be like, oh, D-Law was fucked up for saying that. It wasn't anything like that.
Question, because of I need you to take off your hoodie.
Yep.
Y'all need a new.
Micah needs to start paying barbers again. I'm not mad at it though. Like, he's got on Twitter and talked about how cheap he is with barbers, and for someone who is like that, he keeps himself up pretty well. But you can kind of tell when he took off his hoodie, he was just like, I was not planning on taking off my hoodie.
Quarterback.
Nah.
You sure?
You talking about
You positive?
second in MVP voting. And this is, I've been waiting to get on this.
You just do it. I'm right here. I'm just asking. You sure?
Yes.
You positive?
I'm positive.
Why?
Look at the year he just had.
Oh, Lord. Did you not just sit here and talk to me about the playoffs? Did you not just say?
But you can't put it all on him.
I'm not putting it all on him.
You trying to.
He culpable.
Okay, peep this.
Okay.
So the first part of this conversation about Dak Prescott, I was really excited about how he approached it, right? Because, Stephen A. Smith says, and this is, if you actually watch the full video, Stephen A. Smith asked about the conversation Micah Parsons had with Jerry Jones, where Micah said, I told Jerry Jones that we needed some legitimate linebackers, we needed some bigger dudes on the interior, blah, 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 blah. And so Stephen A. is like, okay, so you said you need all these things. Do you think you need a new quarterback? That's essentially where that question came from. It was a flow from the previous question. And, Micah doesn't come out and say like, no, Dak is the best. Dak is going to win a Super Bowl. He says, our past failures, you can't put it all on him. And I think that was really smart to not try to absolve Dak of all responsibility, but to basically say like, hey, there are other people who need to step up and play better. I think that was really smart.
Take time.
When Purdy threw 4 interceptions to the Ravens.
Yeah.
How many points did the Niners give up?
I don't recall.
I believe it was like 33.
Okay. That was
34.
That was a regular season game. You know,
It does that was almost like the Super Bowl.
33. You got it right. 33.
On 4 interceptions.
Okay.
We gave up 40 plus
48.
as a defense.
You were down 48-16.
So
He threw a pick six.
So
He threw an interception before that.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. See, if you're trying to play the pick and name game, then that's losing culture. At some point, your defense, even when Mahomes do that pick, in the Super Bowl, what does defense do?
Stop.
At some point, your quarterback's not always going to be strifling perfect. The greatest quarterback isn't strifling perfect.
I'm gonna need somebody. This is not a shot at Micah, but I'm gonna need somebody, if you have a second, to tell me what strifling perfect means. Por favor. That's a new one for me.
At some point, your defense got to say, hey, we're going to get a stop.
Well, see, that's the greatness of you, because you're a great teammate. Because what you be right now, you being a great teammate.
No,
hold on. You know, we talked about this on your podcast. And damn it, I'm coming back on. I'm going to fly to Dallas on my own time. You know what I'm saying? Whenever you invite me, you and CD, I saw CD Lamb talking that smack. I want all of y'all there.
Listen.
I know Jack ain't going to show up. But
All right, so before we go on, I'm gonna talk about something else that I liked that Micah Parsons did. And this is partially about legitimate defensive Dak Prescott, and partially about Micah Parsons being smart and how he answered these questions. So, Stephen A. Smith, was basically trying to say he brought up the interceptions again. That's people's favorite thing to bring up about Dak Prescott. And, Micah's like, well, Brock Purdy did this, and starts bringing up situations. And, once you do that, you kind of know, if you watch Stephen A. Smith a lot, you kind of know his next thing is going to be like, oh, are you comparing Dak to Brock Purdy? Are you comparing Dak to Patrick Mahomes? And before he even has a chance to really get into that bag, Micah is like, if you start, picking certain names and being like really selective about your comparison, that's a losing culture. And that's one of those things that once you do it in an argument, you start to bring a person's value system into play. Because basically, if Stephen A. kept trying to go down that path, it's like, wait, I already told you I don't support this whole idea of this losing culture, so I'm not going down that road with you. And I thought that was smart, not only because it basically blocked Stephen A. from doing that trick that he likes to do whenever he debates people, but it also established where Micah's head is whenever it comes to this whole thing. And I also feel like he really made some good points as far as the situations that Dak Prescott is in. Because these are situations that we see multiple quarterbacks in throughout the season that just kind of happen, that I don't think automatically make a quarterback a bad quarterback or an unworthy quarterback. Sometimes you start off a game, you're already down by a few points, and you throw an interception like like Patrick Mahomes did. And so Mike is basically saying, like, hey, Dak isn't the only quarterback who did this. But in those situations, the defense stepped up and made a difference. When it happened with Dak, however, we didn't. So it's another example of Micah Parsons not only doing a really good job of defending Dak Prescott and being like, hey, this thing doesn't make him any worse than any other quarterback, but at the same time taking accountability and saying, hey, there's a few things that the defense actually could have done different in this situation. And look at these other teams and how their defense responded in those situations. And you can see the results that we could have gotten if we did. So props to him for multiple reasons.
I want all of them there.
Listen.
So we can have this discussion. But for the purposes of right now, all I'm saying to you is this. The brother been your quarterback for 8 years, dog.
And how many years has he had a top defense?
Micah with the facts.
Defense wins championships.
Top 3 defenses. Here's what I'm saying to you.
I'm just saying.
Damn good defense the last 3 years.
The last 3, yeah, but in Dak's career, how many times he has a top defense?
Okay, I'm saying at least
there was
3.
a point.
I'm saying at least 3. I'm saying at least 3.
Okay, in the last 3, we had a top 10 defense. But before those, when did he have a top defense? Before Dan Quinn, I got there, and all our rookies and free agents that we all got there.
That's true. That's true.
And defense was champions.
I'm smiling because I love Micah's body language during this section. It was like he knew he had Stephen A. And he's like, yeah, keep trying. I got something for everything you're about to say to me.
Championships. How many points did Kansas City had Lamar Jackson to? 10
Stephen
points.
A's face.
Defense wins championships. Patrick Mahomes didn't put up more than. If your quarterback gives you 21 points, you're bound to win the game. How many points did in regulation did the 49ers hold Patrick Mahomes to?
We're just going to ignore the fact that Green Bay got up 14-0 to y'all, and then Dak throws an interception. It's up 20-0. Then he throws a pick six.
Wasn't Mahomes down 10-0 when he threw the pick to Tig?
Get him, Micah.
We're not going to play the name game. Like,
So we mentioned the Dak Prescott, and then we going to mention Patrick Mahomes?
I'm just throwing situations. You're throwing it.
I love it. He's like, nah, don't try to tell me I shouldn't compare Dak and Mahomes. I'm talking about situations here. Super smart, Micah. Perfect.
Situation. I'm throwing a situation. I'm throwing a situation.
I'm just saying.
You're throwing a situation. I'm throwing a situation.
What about this? Jalen Hurts last year, not this past season. Last year when the Eagles went to the Super
He went all the way back to last year. That's how desperate he is at this point.
Bowl, and they could have won it. If they had won, he would have been Super Bowl MVP. They lost 38-35. Jalen Hurts was better than Dak Prescott last year. Why that happened?
Dak had an injury.
Quinn was there.
Dak had an injury.
Dak came back.
He had the same end. He had
back and looked pretty damn healthy second half of the season.
He came back faster than he was supposed to. He wanted to get back on the field. He saw the rhythm we was in.
Now he came back quick.
He did. He did. If you look up at the state of his injury, it's a 6 to 8 week. He came back in 4.5, I think 5.
Okay.
I'm pausing there because I love this face. I love Micah making this face because he was looking at Stephen A. Smith like, I wish you would challenge me again. Say something else about Dak Prescott. Please say something else about Dak Prescott. So going backwards, though, what he just said about Dak's injury is actually a fact. And it's one of the things that Dak never really brought up in a press conference. So earlier I mentioned that, sometimes players will have injuries, for example, and not necessarily talk about how they're impacted by them. And this is an example. Micah Parsons is absolutely right. When Dak Prescott came back, he came back like a week sooner than what's considered the shortest recovery time for the injury and the surgery that he had. But he came back anyway. So 6 to 8 weeks, actually, I've seen some reports that say up to 10, depending on the extent of it, which we really didn't find out full details, right? But 6 to 8 was like a common recovery period that was mentioned. And Dak did come back a little bit quicker than that. And that was something I just feel like not a lot of people acknowledged. And actually, let me go back to this view because I just love Micah making his face at Stephen A. Smith. But I just feel like Stephen A. going back to not 2023 season, but 2022 to talk about Jalen Hurts. Like, okay, so first of all, you can't go to 2023 because like we all saw what happened with Jalen Hurts in 2023. And that's not a knock on him. But I'm going to say, and I don't know if I included this part. As we play the clip, we'll see if we included this part. But there's a part in the conversation where Stephen A. Smith says, I feel like Dak Prescott isn't the best quarterback in Texas. In other words, insinuating that CJ Stroud is a better quarterback than Dak. And when that happens, Micah even talks about the fact that CJ Stroud is having a similar beginning to his career as what Dak had. And I appreciate him bringing that up because I'm going to say the same thing about CJ Stroud that I said about Jalen Hurts in 2022 when everybody was talking about how good he was doing. And that is, neither one of them have had careers long enough for me to feel comfortable comparing them to Dak Prescott in that way. Because Dak came out hot and did amazing. And then over the years, he had to deal with trials and tribulations, both on and off the field, that impacted him in various ways. So until I see a quarterback have a career that long and go through similar things and handle them in the ways that Dak handled them, I don't feel comfortable saying that they're quote unquote a better quarterback. You can say they had a better few weeks. You can say they had a better season. You can say you like their style better, whatever, but to just say overall, in general, they're a better quarterback, I feel like that's a lot. I need to screenshot Micah making this face. This is so perfect.
I like Tony Pollard. So what you're saying to me is, if Jerry Jones goes out and gets you size at the linebacker spot, you don't think y'all need anything. You perfectly fine with everything else y'all got. Is that what you're telling me?
Listen, Steve, listen. It's easy to point out in the league and say, if I had Patrick Mahomes, I would win the Super Bowl every year. It's easy to say.
We know he's on another level.
Yeah. It's easy to say if I had Chris Jones, we'll be the best team.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's easy to say if I was playing with so-and-so, I'll be an all-pro. I'll be this. I'll be that. But matter of fact, it doesn't matter what you got. If that's who you are, it's who you are. So it's not, to my understanding, yeah, we could go get pieces and that'd be great. Just like how we got Gilmore, we got Cooks that made a huge difference.
I think if Diggs hadn't gotten hurt, I mean, that Trayvon is a bad brother now.
Trayvon makes a huge difference. But it's easy to do that. But at the same time, you got to be who you are and say, hey, man, it don't matter who we got. We got to line up and, F shit up. It's all about this. And that's why I say it's more culture and cultural than it is players.
So he's right on this point, but I feel like what he's about to say is where I first started to not necessarily disagree with him, but I was just like, Micah, come on.
I just think nowadays you got guys trying to get paid, guys trying to, they want to live like rock stars, they want to, you got guys that live above the star. They want to live up to the star. Guys like me, I try to hide from the star, on a playing field, I own it. I'm like, yeah, like this is me. Like I love it. Like
when he said he was trying to hide from the star, I'm like, I was making that same face that Stephen A is making right now. Actually, I'm like trying to hide from the star. Micah, like when we talk about dudes who are trying to get paid and like live a certain lifestyle, I feel like a lot of people think about Micah Parsons, but honestly, I think what he was trying to say there is that there are some people who are aiming for that lifestyle who haven't necessarily earned it. Like they need to put a little bit more work in before they should feel comfortable doing that. And I think that's one of those things that's hard to say in explicit terms without putting yourself in a position to really sound like you're calling out some of your teammates. And I think that was one of the other things that people kind of read between the lines with when they were like, oh, Mike is calling out some of his teammates. They did read between the lines in that part because once again, I don't know if I included in this clip, but he does say something to the effect that there's some people who want A results, but they're putting up a C performance. You hear that, and of course, you're going to naturally assume that he's talking about somebody who's in the locker room with him. So I can understand people kind of drawing conclusions for that, from that, but without him naming names, I don't see the point in making it a big thing and making it seem like Micah Parsons is calling out half the locker room when we don't really know who he's talking about. I'm going to go through some of y'all's comments real quick. JV, what do you mean by Stephen A being on the same diet as Al Sharpton? What does that mean? Al said, I like Micah bringing up Purdy and the Ravens as an example. He has an interesting way of trying to outplay Stephen A. Smith in his verbal chess game. Yes, I think he killed it in that regard. JV said, they didn't want to give Dak his praises when his rookie year ended. Facts. The storyline they stated was, can he do it again? And that's how I viewed Hurts last season and how I view Stroud next season. I think that's fair. If that's what works for Dak, it should be fair for everybody. Clement, what's up? I'm glad you're here. Clement says, Michael learned from the last time Stephen A was on his show. Yes, he did. And that he anticipated that he was going to talk about Dak and his interception along his failures. Yeah, I think he took a lot of notes from that conversation and handled this one a lot better. Al said, a guy with his own podcast is hiding. I don't think so. That's why I made the same face as Stephen A is making, because he's like, I hide from the star. I keep to myself. And I'm like, Micah, who are you lying to right now? You lying to us or you lying to yourself? Because this is not matching.
Yeah, I want to be left alone. I want to be quiet. Like I like to just be to myself. Well,
So I'm really trying to defend Micah here. I think what he's referring to is on a typical day. Because I'm just like, Michael, we just saw you at the Pro Bowl, got MVP in the NBA Celebrity All-Star Game, and then you're like, I just like to be quiet and keep to myself. I'm like, what? So I think he means like during the season on a typical day, like maybe he means he's not like going out to all the events. He's not like in the club or whatever it is that people do these days. I think that's what he means. He's not like a big partier person. So he'll go to official events. He'll go to professional events, networking events. But I think he's just saying that he's not like, okay, I'm out here just partying and mingling all the time. Maybe.
Some guys like to live up to it. Like they like to live up to that name, So I think I really do believe it's more cultural in how guys think. Cause everyone's cool when they up 14. When it's like down 14, everybody looking to the left, everybody looking to the right, everybody that's like.
Let me get back to you and your podcast, because I want everybody to know, first of all, the title of your podcast. What is it?
The Edge.
The Edge, right? With Micah Parsons. What were you hoping to accomplish with this podcast? Because I'm sensing that even though it's successful, you fail when you bring up your argument about Dak Prescott. That's not no fly. That's not no fly. That's not no fly.
I just feel like you have no proven point to say that.
No proven point to say.
I love that he said that because it's true. It's true. And I just like how matter of fact he was about it. He's like, you don't have any, like, where do you get off saying that my podcast suffers whenever I bring up Dak Prescott or defend him? And he kind of challenged Stephen A to actually support what he was saying.
Say that? Oh my God. It's 29 years and counting. Dak Prescott's been in the last 8. He's continued the trend of falling short. That's all the proof I need.
When did Kurt win his first Super Bowl?
Kurt Warner?
Yeah.
Micah came with the facts.
Those years. But he came his like first year in St. Louis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big
Ben Roethlisberger won pretty early in his career. Yeah. I could remember that.
Big Ben did.
All right, Big Ben did.
Tom won early.
Tom Brady won early. Yeah.
Well, how old was Stafford?
And you could been in the league for like 13, 12 years before Detroit traded him, and then he won the year that he finally had a team in L.A.
Okay.
I thought they had a team in Dallas.
Okay.
You had the person.
No. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're talking about when they won the Super Bowl.
I love that he like laid ground rules for Stephen A on Stephen A's show. I love Micah's assertiveness throughout this entire conversation.
Some people it takes. Sometimes it takes time. Like it takes time.
Dak Prescott deserves that time. That's your quarterback.
Smart quarterback. Smart quarterback. Like I said, it's easy to say if I had Patrick or Josh or anybody, oh, I'm due for a Super Bowl. It's easy to say, oh, Dak, go play for the Bills. Josh, come over here, and we swap quarterbacks. Oh, yeah, we're going to win a Super Bowl. It doesn't work like that. He's very good.
Very, very good quarterback who played great this year, who deserved MVP consideration. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but you know that in order for y'all to do it, it's going to have to be y'all.
And we got to play defense. Like,
And there's the accountability. And he's reiterated that during this entire conversation. But it really sounds like regardless of what Stephen A. Smith says, Micah's like, nah, we also need to play defense. He's not running away from the performance of the defense.
There has to be what people are failing to realize, and this is where accountability, culture, leadership all takes place is, there has to be a point in time when Dak does throw a pick in a crucial moment, same way Pat did. And I got to say, yo, don't stress it. I got you. We're going to get a stop right here. Okay. You just need to come back like how I know you can come back.
So y'all haven't been able to do that? Y'all weren't able to do that against San Francisco back-to-back years? You weren't able to do that against Green Bay? Are you kidding me?
Are you
kidding me?
Okay, San Fran game, you could say we could have won that game. We held them to 13 or 19 points, something like that. That's great work, right? But Green Bay game, we could have done better. That's accountability. I'll never just say, like, no. I felt like when he threw that pick, we should have held them to 3, and we should have got out the field.
Okay. Also
but what Dak didn't make D-Law jump off sides on 3rd and 5 on that first goal trip. That's true. Dak didn't make DeRon Bland do hands in the face, what got him the first down. I think it was 3rd and long.
Right.
So that was another section that people said that Micah was taking shots at his teammates. I don't look at it that way because what he just mentioned are things that actually happened. Those penalties happened and those penalties have been discussed. And I feel like, and I don't think his teammates are mad at him for saying that, but like, how can you get mad at Micah for simply admitting like, hey, those penalties happened, they were on the defense and they weren't Dak's fault. It's not like Stephen A. said, whose fault was it that you lost? And Micah's like, well, these dudes had these penalties. They suck. He's defending Dak. And, early in the conversation, he made the point that you can't put it all on Dak. And this is another example of things that you can't put on Dak. So all he's saying is like, hey, here's 2 examples of penalties that affected the game, had a negative impact on the game, and had nothing to do with Dak Prescott. You absolutely cannot look at the failures of the Dallas Cowboys and think that Dak Prescott is the only person to blame. I think that's fair. And what I don't think is fair is trying to say that Micah is taking shots at his teammates by saying that. Because one, he's talking about accountability. So I feel like these are things that he'd be comfortable discussing with those teammates if they had to have a personal conversation with them about it. And two, they're simply true. And he's had penalties. Everybody gets penalties. I don't think acknowledging someone's penalties is an insult or denigrates them as a player, as an athlete. It's simply something that happened that he's using for context in terms of who's responsible for what and holding the proper people accountable in the right situations.
Everything was going to point back to that point when Dak threw the pick, but Dak shouldn't have been to a 7-0 start. That's what people feel like, accountability across the board. Like if we get that stop, right? How we did. If you watch the first 3-4 plays, we were shutting them down. If they punt that ball, and that changed the whole momentum of the game. Changed the whole on third and long, Dak wasn't third and 12 and give up a first down to keep the drive going. Was that Dak Prescott? No. If they punt that ball, it gives up the whole difference of the game. That's why I don't agree that it was just Dak Prescott. I know we could have done things differently defensively.
I'm just wondering when the man is going to stop the bleeding. But I'll ask you this question because you're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. I've never seen this defensive Dak Prescott in my life. I give you mad credit for it. It's unbelievable. When y'all lost that playoff game to Green Bay, and you didn't want to talk to anybody immediately following the game, is this what you were thinking?
No. Or was it something else? I was more hurt about. So I'm more about what. So I'm confused. Like when we get, I'm like, bro, what? And it's easy to, when you're mad and sad and frustrated, to get on the mic and just say something that you might regret and that you just like your thoughts just not clear. Like you know that.
I really like that Micah admitted to this. It's something that, of course, I want to see him get better about, because for what he's saying that he's trying to do in terms of being more responsible for the culture of the Cowboys, taking more accountability and stepping up as a leader, I understand that after a loss, you might get emotional and you might not want to talk to the media because you're concerned about what you might say. You're concerned about saying the wrong thing. But I do feel like if he's going to truly take on the role that he keeps saying he's going to take on, he's going to have to practice that and get better at it, because that is one of those things that can negate everything that he's trying to do in terms of being a true leader and a true example for everybody else on the defense. Hey, Amp, I'm not sure if I've seen you in here before, but welcome. And I agree, Micah does kind of sound like a politician, but like in a good way. I don't think that's a bad thing in this situation, especially when you're debating somebody like Stephen A. Smith. So I feel like he's handling it well. Al said, the reality is that the defense didn't make stops or slow down the Packers offense for this particular game. That is facts. You simply didn't show up in force, and you can't blame Dak for Packers continually scoring. All true, all true.
Emotion, like, I can't believe this. We home, we just got. So for me, I was just like, man, like, I had to have a self-evaluation. And it was more from the fact that it was everything that happened all year that led up to that moment. The offsides, the penalties, the not gap accountable, the run game. It was just like, it was like deja vu. That was just like, man, like, what can I say? Like everything that everyone, like, and it's hard because everyone, you, other guys painted this picture of run against Dallas, do this against Dallas. You're going to get a lot. If they can do this against Dallas. And I'm like, man, they crazy as hell. Like, ain't no way. And then the same, and it's like, but it's like, we show signs we could do it, because when Detroit and Gibbs and Montgomery came down, what we do?
Y'all still should have lost that game, in my opinion. But
it doesn't matter.
No.
But what we do when it came to that run and all that other stuff, we shut it down. So I'm like, okay, it's hopeful. But when all them things lead back up, the offsides, the turnovers, the lack of execution, it's just like, what can I say?
I really appreciate the vulnerability that he's showing in this moment. So if you watched the episode that Micah Parsons did with CeeDee Lamb, he kind of touched on this idea that there were things the entire season that they needed to get better at and work on, But because they were winning, they kind of were able to keep brushing it off and keep kicking the can down the road and not address certain things as seriously as they probably should have. And so it sounds like when this Green Bay loss happened, he wasn't just emotionally dealing with the loss. The weight of everything that he had neglected and everything that he watched his teammates neglect throughout the entire season kind of came crashing down on him all at once. And so I can understand that being kind of heavy. But I still say that that's something that he should get better at handling if he's going to be the kind of leader he says that he wants to be for the team and for the defense. But I do appreciate him going into more depth and detail about what was on his mind and how that felt, because I feel like it lends a little bit of perspective to when we start seeing maybe certain changes, maybe certain actions or inactions on the parts of certain people once OTAs and training camp and things like that start. I think this is one of those things that we can go back to and think about, like, okay, well, this is how Micah reacted to some of the things that happened last year. So this might be why he went off on this person. This might be why him and this other person had to have a talk with that, like that other teammate or whatever. I also like the fact that he's connecting it to things that happened before, because let's go back to the fact that this entire conversation is kind of like a defensive Dak Prescott. That's how they ended up planning this show, was that Stephen A. Smith was on Micah's show in the middle of attacking Dak Prescott. Time ran out and he was like, no, we're going to revisit this. So even before Micah came on this show, he knew that's where it was going to go, right? But when it comes to Dak, a lot of people, especially Stephen A. Smith, try to always go back to things from Dak's past, specifically the interceptions. And what Micah is doing here is saying, hey, no, there are things that I've had a habit of doing, or that our defense has had a habit of doing. There are patterns our defense has had that also showed up in these games. And y'all don't acknowledge our patterns the way that y'all acknowledge Dak Prescott's patterns. But these are some things that we should have addressed a long time ago. So I'm not going to focus on what y'all think Dak should have addressed. I'm going to talk to y'all about what I think we should have addressed. That's how I'm going to hold myself and my unit accountable in this situation. So I respect it.
I didn't earn the right to say anything, but everyone wants to hear from me.
Of course, because you're Micah Parsons.
But I didn't earn
Dak
it.
Prescott. Dak Prescott spoke to the media. We want to hear from him, and we want to hear from you.
That y'all can hear from him, because he can give his own perspective of how things went and how we're going to how. No, I think Jalen Hurts is by far.
Really? Yeah. Jalen Hurts to me cannot mess with Dak.
All right, at that point, I think they get into a whole nother topic about some other stuff. So we can stop there. Plus, I got to go in a minute. Dom, I'm going to share this comment that you made, because I agree. You said, I feel you, but at some point we got to move on. It is what it is at this point, talking to Amp in the comments. And I agree, because I also intend to move on. I'm really addressing these things mainly because, they're like, I like to follow up on conversations that I see on Twitter, conversations that I see in other people's comments. Like, I really enjoy examining just the state of the fan base and the conversations that are happening among fans. But I do think at some point we need to look forward. And there are some people putting out great content when it comes to the draft, when it comes to free agency, all of that stuff. So while I'm like, yes, we were all disappointed in the playoff loss, I think the time to be like, oh, so-and-so is a day late and a dollar short, I think that time is over. If he says he's going to be more responsible, if he says he's going to be a better leader, if he says he's going to hold people accountable, all right, give him a chance and let's see if that's what happens this season. And if it's not what happens, we can address that at the appropriate time. But I think as for right now, we don't really have a reason to, dang it, that light keeps shorting out on me. But we really don't have a reason to not take his word for it. You know what I'm saying? I think maybe there is a reason to question what he really brings to the table in terms of being a leader, just because there are so many things that he hasn't experienced, like what we talked about yesterday in my last episode. Dom, are you saying LMAO because of my light? Are you laughing at me because my light keeps shorting out? I need a new one. I need to see if it's under warranty. Because otherwise I'm just sitting in front of a blank wall. My set is not nearly as cool, but I'm gonna get it together, y'all. Slowly but surely, I'm gonna get it together. I saw somebody in the comments was like, please grow your channel. I'm like, I'm gonna get there. Let me get some stuff in the background of my room first. Now I'm gonna kick you out for laughing at me. You are so rude. Yeah, I do think, because of his lack of experience, like, yes, we can have a conversation about his lack of experience, but I do think that his intentions are in the right place. And so, yeah, I'm going to take him at his word until I have a reason not to. So, on that note, last call for questions or comments, unless you're laughing at me because my light blew out. Why would you? That is so rude. I'm like, yeah, my light blew out and I'm mad about it. You're like laughing at me. I should post my Cash App. Send me money for a new light. Damn, y'all are ruthless. So yeah, it looks like nobody really has any other questions right now. Okay, now somebody else is laughing at me. Y'all are mean. I'm about to go because y'all are just mean. Um, but I'll be back tomorrow. I haven't really decided all the topics and I want to talk about tomorrow. I'm putting this one to bed. So unless something crazy comes out related to all this, like we're done talking about Micah's comments and Emmitt Smith's comments and D-Law's comments. But I do want to talk about some of the coaches that have been brought onto Zimmer's coaching staff and talk a little bit about that. And if anybody has any interesting perspectives on the 12-team playoff thing, I might talk a little bit about that too. Because like I said earlier, the way that whole situation is going to intersect with revenue to the sport and the state of NIL and the state of college athletics, I think is really interesting. And that news just came out this late morning or afternoon, so it'll be interesting to see people's thoughts on it. Dom says, I mean no harm. I'm gonna do you like I'm doing Micah and take your word for it right now. But like, this isn't the first time that light has blown out on me. So if you laugh at me next time, like we're officially beefing, like for real. So get it out your system. John said, what are you saying? I thought my eyes was playing tricks on me with that light. I don't know what that means. I don't know what y'all are saying. Anyway, I gotta run. I gotta get out of here. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. We'll talk more Cowboys stuff, more sports stuff in general. In the meantime, thank y'all so much for showing up. Thanks for the love in the comments. And if you, like Oscar and a couple of other people, want to see me grow my channel, please give me a few likes, leave some comments. Don't forget to subscribe, turn the notifications on, and of course, share this content with other people you think might like it. So on that note, this has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm Jazz Monet, and I'm out.